When is the last time we've seen a fire last this long and keep on coming back? It's almost like this is part of their plan. And noticing the fires on the roof, and one thing that a lot of people didn't realize is when is the last time we've seen a fire last this long and keep on coming back? It's almost like this is part of their plan. And noticing the fires on the roof, and one thing that a lot of people didn't realize is it's all solar panels on fire. And what are solar panels actually made up of? I gotta be honest, I don't know. And how could that be impacting the air quality for us? But then they say they have a state of emergency in Los Angeles, and Governor Gavin Newsom, he instituted the state of emergency. And one thing that you gotta understand, I used to think state of emergency, that means they bring in the National Guard, or they really, they're gonna get to business. All declaring a state of emergency means is they're allowed to tap into different funds to resolve the issue. It's not actually doing anything other than saying, hey, the money we set aside for rainy days, we're using that now because we're too inept to stop a building fire that has been put out, reignited, and been poisoning the skies for over 6 days.
Warehouse fire that has been burning for 6 days. Residents near the warehouse have already begun to evacuate the area at this time. No injuries reported. Officials say the fire could have been started when testing for new solar panels on the roof went wrong.
So much for green energy with this Lineage cold storage facility. They said, let's go green, protect the environment, use less fossil fuels. And now, how many solar panels do we have to have operating for how long can do the carbon offset of what this 6-day fire has done to our environment? Honestly, I don't think it could ever offset it. And I speak as someone that have seen people, they got solar panels for their home, and it's amazing.
The DOJ has a message for people caught defacing federal property, including
something different. But just the idea that solar panels on fire, and look how bad it is. Like day 6, this was as of 2 days ago. Alexandra Tig out there, and if you gotta be wearing all this hazardous material with duct tape, airlocking away the dangerous fumes, imagine what's happening to just the kid that lives behind this facility.
At the cold storage fire in Boyle Heights, the Lineage cold storage facility, is that we have had Chinook helicopters drop 3,000 gallons of water on the roof.
This is exactly like when a Tesla catches fire. And mind you, I love my Tesla, I love EVs, but I know wholeheartedly, one, it's more dangerous to be in if it catches fire, and two, it doesn't really save the environment. Yeah, maybe it's marginally better than using fossil fuels, but a lot of these places get their electricity from fossil fuels instead of just regular gasoline. But then also the environmental impact to make the lithium battery that I'm sitting on 1,000 of them is much worse than burning my gasoline.
This structure. And so now that firefighters are getting the upper hand, what we are seeing is a concern about the roof and whether it is safe to even get up on that roof, because all of the solar panels have burned clean on one side.
And then what happens? All the solar panels, some of them didn't get scorched, but I imagine the soot that went over the top of them, they're no longer good. And are they going to be like what do you call it? Like a wind turbine. They say, oh, wind energy is so renewable, but they only last for so long. They're these giant metal beams, and once you take them down to be replaced, they just sit in a giant graveyard to never be used again. Can't be recycled, can't be disposed of. I imagine this is going to create a huge environmental hazard afterwards. You say, solar panels are primarily made about 76% glass, 10% plastic polymer, 8% aluminum, 5% silicone, 1% copper, and less than 0.1% silver and other metals. So 10% plastic polymer is putting those toxic fumes in the air. And one thing I remember about the wildfires that were near me when I lived in LA is, I didn't want to wear an N95 mask. This is before COVID, but I was like, I'm not trying to wear a mask. I'm just going to be out there and I'll just deal with the bad smell. But they say, keep in mind, all the animal poo, all the poison oak, and whatever pesticides and the homes and gardens that they have put next to the houses that got burned, that's now in the air, and you are now breathing soot of pesticides, poison oak, animal poo. It is very, very dirty stuff, kind of like flood water. You think it's just groundwater, but it's so much worse than you actually think it is.
of this facility, and thousands of pounds of water have been dumped on that roof at the same time.
Yeah.
So will that roof cave in? Is there a chance of that? More water is going to get poured on that roof from water drops. What is the situation with the integrity of that roof? How safe is it? We're going to find out from officials. I have no...
And again, they haven't.
We got
Why
your
don't we
message.
already know? Don't you think
We
that we have
appreciate
scientists
your
or somebody that,
willingness to
like, you
help.
know, evaluated the
Sure
safety
you're
of
up
solar
for the
panels on
mission.
buildings? Shouldn't there
When
already
Bennett
be
told me about the horrors he endured while in White
studies
Mantle
or
captivity,
warnings
I
saying,
felt it my
we
duty
know if
to
you guys
assist.
have solar panels on a
We'll
building,
blast these zealots back
buildings
into
catch
the
on
history
fire.
books.
That's
Right.
part of it. Why
I don't
don't
know
we
what'll happen
already know what it
inside,
is? Mayor Karen
but I'm
Bass is going
glad
to talk
you're
about it
with
later
us.
on, but it just gets
Walk
worse.
right in.
We'll let
Yeah,
you know.
that will be
We're
the
ready.
next phase.
He said it smelled really bad Sunday in the San Fernando Valley, and that is over a hill many miles away, and yet they hadn't even evacuated some of the parts of
We're
Boyle
ready.
Heights. It's crazy.
Has everyone made
Get
peace
to
with
that
their
building
gods?
and make sure that roof collapse, if it happens, can be
I'm
avoided
carrying a heavy thing
and no
that won't
injuries
let you set
are
fire.
incurred.
I can cast spells when
Another thing
absolutely needed,
to
but for
learn
the
from all
most part,
this
you'll need
here
to keep
in
me
Boyle Heights.
alone.
I'm Alex Dating. Good
You
talking
think
to you
you
guys.
can do that?
Thank you, Alex
Any
Dating, for being
volunteers
out there
for
and
that?
putting yourself in harm's way, because you saw this over here. They said aerosolized
Figure it
lead
out as we
and
go.
cadmium, I can't pronounce that, aka
Shout
turbo
and I'll
cancer.
follow
You see this
you,
over at
but
Dodger
don't
Stadium.
mistake
Now,
my
you know, obviously I'm a
willingness
Dodger
for
fan,
blind
and I was seeing this game, and I was like, are they gonna cancel the game, or do the Dodgers not care about their $1 million players that much? They're gonna let them play amongst the turbo cancer air. But apparently, as the day went on, this top layer got blown away. Thankfully, but I'm willing to bet the MLB, even if they tested the air quality, the AQI, and said, you know what, probably shouldn't still be playing, they're not going to miss out on the millions that they had. There's a rain delay, but there's no turbo cancer delay, so they probably let it happen. But the craziest part about this is one,
Protect
Karen
me.
Bass
I'm about
was
to
out of
try
town
something.
again for another major Los Angeles fire that had been going on
Getting
for
us
6 days.
across.
Now, mind you,
How did you do that?
the first one was she got
Practice.
warnings that there was going to be super fire
Nice work.
conditions,
If I
and she
ever
was
need
kind
a
of
lever
on
pulled, I'll send
on
you
recording
a
saying,
man.
okay, look, it's
Ever been
planned
fired out of
to
a
be in
cannon,
Ghana, you know,
Glenna?
one of the
I
wedding,
can-
I think it was, but it's like she knew about the risk and she left anyway. This one was, I think she was in the air already while heading to Chicago, but the idea is if she has a major fire and knows politically
Cover your ears.
it's going to decimate her, and she still has to win another election in November. It's gonna look terrible if she doesn't come back immediately, but no. She still made a trip. She still stayed in Chicago to visit the Barack Obama Library. It looks like an eyesore. And the idea that she found it more important to virtue signal to people over in Chicago with her appearance next to the Obama Library than it is to
These are proximity.
save
You can
the
destroy
young
them
black kids that
safely
live in
as
the
long
Boyle
as you
Heights.
don't
Like,
get
this
too
is
close
insane to
to
me.
detonate.
Here she is previously saying, hey, I needed to be there. It was a mistake to travel.
Obviously, I hated it. But I was supposed to sit out in the city, frankly, with my family.
When they said it's going to take 60 days to put out the fire, maybe that's why she was out of town. She's like, you know what? Let me just let this blow over before I make an appearance. Because even when she makes an appearance, she makes moves.
Because I was impacted. My family was impacted.
Isn't Karen Bassett, am I getting accused? Or isn't it Karen Bassett's brother, her own brother, is suing her over the wildfires? Yeah, I hated it. Again, she didn't hate the fact the fires occurred. She didn't hate the fact that this is going to provide her and Governor Gavin Newsom the greatest opportunity in a land grab in their lifetimes. They don't hate that. They just hate the idea that it makes them look bad sometimes. But again, I don't think they're there to protect the citizens. I think they're there to protect their own political career. And now with what we know about the elections, she doesn't really need to focus on that because they can just find the balance endlessly. You weren't that far. You were like a 4-hour flight away this time. You weren't in Ghana. You weren't in another country, on another continent. You were in Chicago. You could have just landed, heard about the fire in Boyle Heights, and flew back the same day. But you didn't do that.
It was a mistake to travel, but I will tell you that we need to evaluate everything. Because honestly, truly, if I had all of the information,
think that later on they found out that she had that information. She knew that the fire hazard was happening. She's just lying to your faces on ABC7. But the thing that people say is the owner of the warehouse that's on fire is a guy that gave a max contribution to the re-elect Mayor Karen Bass for Mayor 2026. Now, one thing I would say is I'm not about the whole, like, you get what you voted for. So if your building goes up in flames, you voted for Karen Bass, because it doesn't only impact him. The main impact is all the kids that still got to go to school, all the people that still got to go to work and inhale all these fumes because businesses don't care about your exposure to turbo cancers in the air. They just care about, being in business still in a Mayor Karen Bass economy. I care about them. I don't care about this guy, and I don't think they deserve that to be done inadvertently. But now you see, you'd almost rather Karen Bass still be over there in Chicago at that library just being an idiot, because when she comes back, she makes it so much worse by being an idiot.
For a sixth straight night, firefighters in Boyle Heights remain on the attack, drenching the giant warehouse fire with water as smoke continues pouring into Boyle Heights and far beyond.
Your eyes are burning. It's really bad for people that have respiratory issues.
Residents expressing their anger and frustration, tired of breathing in dirty air.
Air quality.
And here's one thing that we just realized, though. It's like during the COVID times.
Residents expressing their anger and frustration, tired of breathing.
Don't these medical masks do next to nothing when it comes to air particulate? Like, didn't we realize that when Fauci said, don't wear the masks, they do nothing? Okay, you know what? Do wear the masks. We just need the masks for the doctors. Okay, the cloth masks and the medical masks, they do nothing. Maybe for a little bit of water particulate, but not for the aerosol you're inhaling. The only thing that works is a firmly suctioned onto you N95 mask with a respirator, and if you have a beard or any facial hair, it's ineffective. Again, they are with this thing. Well aware of that this is ineffective, and they're using this. Yeah, they make it worse, actually. I wouldn't be surprised. Brainwashing works. Brainwashing works. Masks prove it. Exactly.
In dirty air.
Air quality is really bad right now.
Waiting in long lines Monday for free masks and air purifiers.
Right now, they're doing this just to, okay, you guys be quiet, No, we want a town hall meeting. We want them to...
Town hall meeting won't do anything because you guys kept on electing these people. And again, I'm not exactly blaming them because I don't think that the election something suspicious.
Tell us what's going to happen.
The fire erupted last Wednesday at the massive cold storage warehouse, and since then, firefighters have been battling from the ground and air.
What we're doing now is pulling everything away so we can take those skins off and get the water to penetrate.
Recently tearing away parts of the 500,000 square foot building, trying to reach hot spots buried deep inside.
The more water we put on this fire, the less smoke we're going to get.
A similar fire ignited on the...
Thank you, good night, LA. I understand he's saying this because there are idiots out there, but I'm sure we're in great hands right now. Because remember, they just fired the last LA Fire Department chief, and now I believe that fire department chief is like suing her for slander, I believe. But the new fire department chief isn't necessarily going to be the most qualified for the job. It's going to be the person that is most willing to take the fall for Karen Bass's next fiasco.
Roof of the same building almost 2 years ago. Fire officials still investigating what exactly caused this blaze.
We're having a legislative motion.
If this becomes another fire that was started by arson of someone that was against capitalism, because remember the fire in Ontario, which is about like maybe 2 hours away from LA, depending on traffic sometimes, but the Ontario warehouse fire was started by a guy that idiotically recorded himself saying, pay us a living wage, pay us a living wage. It's like those guys get paid fairly well, but it's not daddy government's responsibility to tell your boss to pay you enough to buy a home in California on a warehouse job. As someone that has worked in a warehouse before, I will say it's nobody's fault that you're not getting a good wage. Like, sad to say, sometimes you have to better your skill set to get paid a living wage. But the idea that they keep on beating this down their throats saying you deserve a living wage, $20 an hour, no, $25 an hour, unlimited dollars an hour is how much you're worth now. It's like, if this is the same scenario, will they change anything about their verbiage, or will they just wait until the next warehouse fire destroys the entire health of the next generation? Yeah, that's it. Those jobs are starters. They're doing this crazy stuff with fast food workers, and see how many of those restaurants went under immediately.
To get to the bottom of how this fire started.
We have these warehouses all around.
Yeah, we do.
And we don't know what's in the...
What do you need?
I mean, we have warehouses, we don't know what's in them. Yes, like somebody else said, they line the roof of this warehouse with flammables, for one. But two, there's an inventory. Every warehouse has an inventory unless it's being shady. But again,
We have these warehouses all around, and we don't know what's in these warehouses. It's interesting that these locations are only in particular communities, and we need to now take a look at that.
guys, the warehouse fires are only targeting people, communities of color. And I'm telling you right now. Oh, thank you for the prime sub, O'Neill the Welshman. Warehouses aren't going to be in very, very affluent areas. I can guarantee you whatever neighborhood Karen Bass and Governor Gavin Newscam lives in, they do not live in an area that is zoned for industrial warehouses. If you have housing and it's bordering the zoning for industrial warehouses, it's probably going to be a poor community. And it's probably going to be a community that is more populated with lower income individuals, oftentimes people of color. But the idea that this is some revelation to her shows what an imbecile Mayor Karen Basorda is if she's like, warehouses only seem to burn neighborhoods of people of color. Maybe it's because the warehouses only exist there. But here it is, gotta make everything about race. Gotta target race, because it's easier to say warehouse fires are racist than it is to say, yeah, maybe I was over in Chicago at a library ribbon cutting ceremony. Don't mind me as I look the other way of the next possible arson fire.
Because we don't want environmental hazards or risk concentrated in particular black and brown communities.
City volunteers driving around delivering air purifiers to residents.
I wonder how many of our tax dollars went into buying those air purifiers, and some of them are very good. I remember when there was wildfires near me, my neighbor bought one of those Dyson tall fans that actually has like an AQI rating on it, and it's like, okay, is this pseudoscience? It's very expensive, but he bought it, and indoors where we thought we were safe, where we couldn't smell it, it was like 99 AQI danger zone, and eventually the air filter got us down to like a green zone, and you took the filter out, and it's like got soot all over it, so I bought one as well. I wonder if this is like the babies to babies diaper fiasco Governor Gavin Newscam had, where it's like a pack of diapers from Target costs maybe like $10, and then through the Babies to Babies initiative, they charged like $50 per pack of diapers and only gave it to people of color. Is this the same thing where they said, you know, air purifiers is what they need? So how about we just let this fire burn forever, spend $2 million on air purifiers, and buy $500,000 worth of air purifiers, only give it to people of color, and then also say, you know, we have to pay our people first, but look what we're doing to solve the crisis that we're kind of ignoring.
As many wonder what exactly they're breathing in.
They're giving us masks, they're giving us air purifier. It's like a little Band-Aid, you know?
Yeah.
And what's gonna happen like a year from now?
And I wonder if, having lived through this crisis, is this a red pill moment for them? To say like, oh yeah, we voted for the people that will fight ICE, that will not lock up our young people in jails, and then when they see a crisis happening to them, because Boyle Heights didn't see the wildfires that the Valley saw, or that the Pacific Palisades saw, they're a little bit too south from like the, it wasn't Glendale that burned, I forget the city that it was, but just, they weren't impacted by the other ones. Is this a red pill moment that will forever change her voting history and the way she sees the media? Or will she just continue to say, you know what, they screwed me over that one time, it probably will give me early terminal cancer. It can't be a MAGA supporter. Like, I wonder if that's how it's happening.
Little Band-Aid, you know? And what's gonna happen like a year from now?
You won't know, and the idea is it'll happen 10 years from now. Just like what happened at Border Ranch, where they had like the gas leak. The gas leak is still happening. I was crashed there. I had to check. But it was Border Ranch had the gas leak, had to evacuate all the people. Because everybody's complaining about, I think it was like nosebleeds and headaches. They never fixed it. They just eventually moved people back in. And what will happen is you guys will get scary turbo cancers in a decade or 2 decades. your life will be cut short, and your children may be able to sue the city, the taxpayers when you pay them back. Nothing will gain nothing from this, but you're just supposed to accept it because you can't do any better. And they keep on electing idiots, what do they think is going to happen?
Here's a live look from Skyfox. You can see the massive 500,000 square foot warehouse in the side of the building where the fire's been taking place, ripped away so firefighters can now access it and put more water inside, about 12,000 gallons of water per minute on the goal from the fire department.
We're always facing a drought and a water crisis in Los Angeles and Southern California, and these things keep happening.
The problem is to get this under control as quickly as they can, and hopefully by the end of the week. For Live in Boyle Heights, Matthew Seedorf, Fox 11 News.
Most people aren't aware of this. Like, if you're in the area, you're vaguely aware of it. Even in the valley, they can smell it. Maybe even over in Santa Monica, you can smell what's going on. But for the most part, this isn't a national story. Nobody's really talking about it because it's a failure of them. But the crazy part is, over here, they need a bailout from essentially Texas. This is from Mayor Karen Bass, but Spencer's explaining it. 60 days. You would think if it took them 60 days for a similar fire like the solar panels on top of a building, wouldn't they start to say, okay, maybe we stop putting solar panels on top of the tops of these buildings because it's actually a net negative. If you could have 10,000 buildings with a solar panels on top of it, and they're saving us, they're giving us green energy. But if one of those 10,000 buildings burns, it burns for 60 days and emits more toxic fumes than saves us toxic fumes of burning fossil fuels, maybe it's not actually a net positive for us. Maybe pump the brakes and stop doing this, but no, we're run by idiots. So is that asbestos? If that's asbestos and that's in the air, you guys had to be evacuated the first day. They should know. There should be a blueprint. Something in the city. If Karen Minnesota wasn't one, garbage herself, but two, in Chicago, they could have pulled those permits and see, okay, what exactly is burning? What's in it? Are we dumping pounds of asbestos directly into the lungs of the people that live in that neighborhood? She's out there saying, we don't know what's in the building. You know exactly what's in the building. Why are they doing this?
So we've been able to tear off the walls using an excavator, and now what we have is a food burning fire with Class A combustible, ordinary combustible inside, which would be just your regular byproducts. So that's why you see a lot of smoke still being generated. But what it's allowed us to do by removing the walls, it's allowed us to bring in water cannons. We've got our regional partners because of the state of emergency that Mayor Bass and County Supervisor Solis put out yesterday, which freed up resources for me to
Yeah, exactly. Declaring a state of emergency doesn't mean they do anything different necessarily. It just means they can spend more money. More of your money is set aside.
be able to request additional assistance from the region. So now what we're using is water cannons to cool off the area where Cooler 1 is, to keep it cordoned off, and it's what we're doing later this evening and into tomorrow. So I would anticipate this smoke for about 2 more days, possibly 3. But now we're going to extinguish the fire, and we're going to do that aggressively. We're going to go in there, we're going to put this fire out, and then we're going to all the hazards around there.
Doc says, how do they not know what's in the warehouse? I think they know exactly what's in the warehouse, but it would cause public outrage if they now admit, we know what's in the warehouse. We know what's going on into your lungs. We didn't call a state of emergency earlier, and we also didn't evacuate everybody immediately because the cost of evacuating everybody for the taxpayers' dime is like in the millions because you got all those people getting money. And probably should have been canceling FIFA games in SoFi Center. Probably should have been canceling Dodger games in Dodger Stadium. Like, a lot of stuff should have been done, but their economy can't withstand that hit. They'd rather risk giving you turbo cancer than actually doing the right thing. They know what's inside the warehouse. They know how bad it is. And the fact that I wonder why they're recording this maskless, unless they're willing to go there themselves without a mask, without a respirator, makes me know it's not safe. but then they say Karen was warned by the last LAPD fire department chief that the dangerously unfolded and couldn't keep LA safe. Karen cut their budget by $17 million. Remember, Spencer was this is the reason Spencer Pratt ran for mayor, was because of this information was being suppressed. Then his town burned down. Now they're trying to get resources from Texas to manage a single structure fire. If LAPD, or not LAPD, if Los Angeles is one of the largest economies in the world, and they cannot manage a single structure fire in under a week, with all these resources they have, they cannot withstand a natural disaster. Another Northridge earthquake, another massive wildfire, not wildfire, Austin fire. They're literally living in the third world in Los Angeles right now. It is sad. But what's crazy is it's filming Police LA. You've seen this video of the Boyle Heights warehouse fire from Los Angeles last night. And you see this. And it's like, yeah, look at all the smoke going over. This is like eastbound right here. Like downtown LA's here, Boyle Heights, like Dodger Stadium's gonna be over here somewhere. It's blowing east and north, so you got like Pasadena up there, maybe like Arcadia, but you have all these residential areas right underneath the burn zone. So it could be asbestos, it's solar panels, it's whatever chemicals that are in the frozen dino nuggies that they had packaged it. I don't know which will be inside. But Film the Police LA, a very, very left-leaning journalist, which, you know, me and him don't agree on things politically, but he does good journalism. But he's out there saying, imagine not evacuating the surrounding neighborhood. Exactly. And you see this over here where this is the neighborhood earlier on. This is July 20th, 3 days ago, which as of yesterday was day 6, I believe. Look at this smoke. This is before she probably knew to put on that giant respirator mask. Like, this is where children live.
I'm here in Boyle Heights, where behind me you can see the Lineage cold storage warehouse fire. Smoke is still emitting from this fire, and as we are here right now, we are seeing that same dark plume of black.
The warehouse is an industrial area, but it's planted right there amongst a whole bunch of residential zones.
Smoke is starting to rise again. That means that something new, something very toxic and different is beginning to burn there right now. There have been aggressive water drops from helicopters here, but as you can see, that color of the smoke is now starting to change, especially up here where you see this black plume rising right there.
Yeah, that's never good right there. Jesus.
Is a different type of material that is burning that is very toxic.
Well, it's the chemicals and the lithium batteries and the solar panels. You know what? You're right. Because I was just thinking of the solar panels. What is the glass made out of? But the solar panels go to a battery that holds the energy that is used later on, like, you know, in off times, to use during off times when it's not sunny. That's what's going in your lungs. So it's essentially just like a Tesla fire that you can dump water on it endlessly, but you just have to let it burn itself out. That's terrifying that everybody's breathing this, and they didn't, like, how come nobody's going out there saying immediately stop installing solar panels in mass on top of buildings? Where's Greta Thunberg for that?
Now, officials have said that, you know, they declared a emergency here so that they can use different kinds of resources to tackle the fire. But it looks like this is a very, very tough firefight for at least.
It's really bad. But one thing that I saw over on, I didn't even see it on Los Angeles. I saw it on r/Los Angeles. But so many people are complaining about why is there very little news/government response on the Boyle Heights fire? Laws here, sensors are going off. Does FIFA have an influence? How come no one's talking about it? And they're saying because it's Boyle Heights and not Beverly Hills. But the sad part is because Beverly Hills has its own mayor, has its own fire department, has its own little government. It's like Beverly Hills and like Culver City have their own little government going on, separate from the greater Los Angeles area. The reason you guys aren't getting mass evacuations is because they found out last time. They can lie to you top to bottom about the Pacific Palisades fires being started by arson or whatever it may be, or the ineptitude of Edison Electric or whatever it may be, power, I forget which one it is. But the idea is they were able to essentially land grab and bend you guys over backwards, and nobody voted differently. Well, apparently nobody voted differently. They now know they can do whatever they want to natural disaster, and you guys will sit there and take it because, sad to say, Even Reddit is hyper left, like 97% left. And even Reddit is noticing our governments are failing us. But then again, having Mayor Karen Besorda probably being re-elected, and the other socialists maybe getting elected, but getting out Spencer Pratt. And the one thing I will say is, even as of day 6 of the fires, I believe, they're still counting votes. Like, Los Angeles mayor race is still counting votes. So I wouldn't say I'm going to go back there and blame the residents out there complaining about the fires. Like, oh, all they're giving us is air purifiers and these dinky little masks over there, and that's why you deserve it. I'm saying, nah, something weird's going on over in Los Angeles, where obviously people didn't want to vote to have their taxes increased to like 10.25, I believe, from 9.75. And I'll tell you right now, yes, even though Los Angeles tax rate can be 9.75, most of the little tiny sub-cities, Culver City, Santa Monica, I forgot where else, even parts of the valley, they'll tack on their extra tax rate. So a lot of these places will be like 11% sales tax. People didn't vote that for themselves, but, you know, Los Angeles needing several months to count ballots. What is this? Till today, and then something like Colombia can hand count 99.8% there, 25 million ballots in under 3 hours. Something strange is going on, but then Spencer says, okay, 6, they might finish counting my votes before they get the structure fire out. It's true, but at least this is shedding light on the idea that 1, people didn't vote for this nonsense, and 2, Donald Trump's going to bat for Steve Hilton in a way Chad Diaco was not sheriff. And now Spencer Pratt saying something fishy happened over in Los Angeles, and now we got to investigate it.
You are criminally liable. In other words, they can put you in jail if you say soy for citizenship.
Yes.
They put you in jail if they ask you. You're not allowed to ask that. Did you know that? It's the craziest thing I've ever seen going on.
It's crazy that anybody could walk into any voting booth and say, I'm decoy, and fill out my ballot for me. Not saying it has happened. I can't prove that's happened, but the idea that anybody can either pick up my ballots, fill it out. Yes, it's a crime, but I don't think there's anything to stop them from doing it. Or going in the voting booth and saying, I'm decoy voice. I'm voting for Mayor Karen Besorda.
Hey, did they screw the kid, Pratt?
Yes.
Boy, he's leading, and all of a sudden he's lost. And it was sort of interesting. The election, you ever see an election where they're 2.5 weeks in?
Yes.
An election that takes weeks to count the votes? But after the evening, it looked like he was going to win, or certainly be in the runoff.
Because they learned their lesson back in 2020. They did it too fast. 4 swing states all simultaneously have things like pipe leaks or poster boards over walls. Then all of a sudden you get the spike, the exact number they need, and every single swing state he needs to win. Happens overnight, it's mysterious. It essentially feels like they did the same exact thing, but this time with late ballots being counted over the process of weeks.
And then I started hearing rumors as the days went by, days and days went by, that Pratt is fading. He's fading. I said they rigged the election. And then lo and behold,
his words, not mine.
He didn't qualify, even though he was so far up in the 3rd place person that it was almost impossible.
And the one thing I'll say is if Spencer was in the lead by 35% on election night in-person voting, I think that's more representative of what Los Angeles residents actually wanted. They wanted change. They wanted Spencer Pratt. They wanted their own reality show over any of these crazy socialists around there.
And then it started happening with the next candidate, Steve Hilton.
You said, dude, the farms in Cali are going to absorb that asthma, but it's organic. You talking about the stuff that's the lithium fires, the lithium batteries, the asbestos, and whatever toxic fumes were inside that factory are now going to be 1 in your groundwater, 2 in your lungs, and 3 in the food that just gets shipped out God knows where. This is like an environmental disaster. Like, no, Besorda was found it more important to be in Chicago at the Obama Library, and then coming back and saying, this is only impact black people. Say, do you still think there's a chance Pratt can win? I think Pratt had stuff he was saving until the final election in November. So release it earlier, and I think someone's going to have to step down. I won't say who, but I believe he had he had something in the bag. You said he did.
And all of a sudden, about 4 or 5 days after, this is after the election's over, they said, Steve Hilton is starting to lose.
Yeah, they tried to give it to him too.
I said, here we go again. First they called up the U.S. Attorney in California. They said, we're going to have a number in the next week. Next week, they called up the very powerful U.S. Attorney in California, and I said, do me a favor. Take a look. They're trying to steal that election too. I guess they called up. They said, this is the U.S. Attorney code. We have your great U.S. Attorney. So over the next week, he was definitely going to lose, but the U.S. Attorney called. We wanted to check your votes. About an hour after the call.
What Governor Gavin Newsom, right before the election, said it made it illegal for the feds to investigate a California election. It's almost like this was pre-planned. And then remember, Governor Gavin Newsom went out there and said, hey, if Riverside Sheriff Chad Bianco and Steve Hilton make the jungle primary for governor, we're going to have an emergency break glass scenario where we can get a Democrat still to run for governor in that final election. Which makes me wonder, was this that emergency break glass scenario?
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Hilton has won, so...
Yeah.
Had I not...
Once you threaten them with an audit or a lawsuit, and they say, okay, never mind, you guys won, that kind of verifies it.
If he made that call, Steve Hilton would right now be watching the election from home. So I don't know.
It's like Spencer.
He would have a great chance, but the election's totally rigged. California's totally rigged. All mail-in ballots. It's a disgrace. We got to pass the Save America Act.
You do. But the sad part is how many Republicans in Congress and in Senate refuse to pass the Save America Act. I refuse to believe all these Los Angeles residents saw the Pacific Palisades fire destroy communities and effectively be a land grab for socialists to take over. Lie to your face constantly and said, you know what? That's okay, Mayor Karen Basoda is still our #1 option. We don't want a Spencer Pratt. And the fact that it's happening again, they're even on a hyper-left Reddit, they're saying, they're noticing how come Boyle Heights hasn't been evacuated, what's going on with FIFA games at SoFi Center, why are the Dodgers still playing right next to the fires. If hyper-left Reddit is noticing, as heavily moderated as it is, I don't even think Democrats, progressives, the Democrat by default types, I don't even think they were supporting Mayor Karen Basoda or Nikki Haley. I think this is all sus, to say the least.
Give me that. You stay put. Be careful up there. Conditions have gotten worse since Bangar left. You'll have to find another way up.
Brace yourselves. All together.
This storm isn't normal. Blocking us from following the Vanguard? Makes you wonder if it's intentional.
Adrenaline
And who's
rising.
pulling the strings.
Watch yourself out there, Commander.
You're being a distraction.
Sounds like that worked out okay.
But no change in the storm. If someone's responsible, it wasn't that thing. Head on back. I'll send more scouts later.
Underground facility. Strange. I'm reading myriad signals. And who is that with you? A Norn boy and a female chum?
Got it. Okay, don't follow too close. That's a bit off. too. You know what I mean.
Believe me.
I did it. They tested weapons.
We shall shake it off. Persevere. Peace yourselves.
Back off! I'm working. Too many hints. Wait, intruders! Intruders! Highly an interactive audience! New test subjects have arrived. Their timing is exquisite.
Hey, you'll pay for this.
It teems with outrage, the vermin. As if that would save it. As if. Begin test now! Overheating! Out of my way! Out of my way! Oh!
Brace yourself. March on.
Die!
Watch the stuff. Ready. Brace yourself. Adrenaline rising. Negative. Brace yourself. We persevere. Brace yourself. March on.
That was a lot of weaponry.
They sure packed for invasion. Probably going after the Black Citadel.
Or Holbrook. Maybe both. We have to get out of here and warn them.
Welcome back to Void of Fears. Before we jump into today's story, I've got a couple quick things. First, if you could smash that like button, drop a comment below, and hit subscribe if you haven't already. It seriously makes a huge difference. The YouTube algorithm loves that stuff and pushes my videos to new viewers. Secondly, I just launched the Void of Fears podcast on Spotify. Same stories, ad-free, and you can listen with your screen off. Links in the description. I really appreciate every single one of you who takes the time to support the channel. It means the world to me and helps keep it growing. Alright, enough of me rambling. Let's dive into today's story. My name is Corvin Wraith, and for 11 years I made my living restoring other people's broken photographs. Not the kind you find in a shoebox in someone's attic. The kind that used to belong to the government, taken from orbit by cameras nobody outside a handful of agencies ever knew existed, until decades after they'd stopped mattering to anyone in power. I worked out the converted garage behind a rented house on the edge of a small town that passes through purpose. 3 monitors, a film scanner older than some of the negatives I fed into it, and enough silence most days that I'd sometimes go a full week without speaking out loud to another human being who wasn't on screen. My sister called every couple of weeks, mostly out of habit, mostly to ask the same 2 questions. In the same order: are you eating? Are you talking to anyone? I always told her yes to the first, and something close enough to yes on the second that she'd stop pressing. She never believed me, but she also never had time to argue about it. And I never had much to say that would have made the argument worth having. That was the whole shape of my life before any of this started. Quiet, small, built entirely out of routines I never questioned. There's a version of me, a long time before any of that, who used to care about the sky. My father kept a small telescope in the garage of the house I grew up in. The kind you buy at a department store and never quite get the focus right on. On clear nights, he'd drag it out onto the back porch and let me find the moon myself, adjusting the little knobs until the grey blurred edge sharpened into something I could actually call a crater. I used to think, 10 years old, that I'd grow up to do something with that feeling. Instead, I grew up to spend 11 years staring at pictures other people had taken of the same grey surface, cleaning their scratches, correcting their exposure, never once pointing anything of my own back up at it. I hadn't touched a telescope since I was a teenager. I bring this up now only because of how the story ends, and because I think it matters that the part of me that finally noticed the shadow was a part I buried a long time before I ever opened that folder of negatives. I want you to understand all of that before anything else, because nothing that happened to me makes sense unless you understand how ordinary the work was supposed to be. In the autumn before all of this started, a small contracting firm I'd worked with for years sent me a batch of 14 negatives. Water damage mostly, the kind that comes from decades spent in a storage facility that wasn't kept as dry as someone once promised it would be. The frames were dated to a 6-week window in 1962, part of the first generation of American reconnaissance satellites, the ones that spent over a decade quietly photographing the other side of the planet before the presidential order finally opened the whole program to the public in the mid-90s. You've probably seen pictures from that program without realizing it. Grainy black and white views of farmland, missile sites, the occasional accidental landscape nobody on the ground ever knew had been photographed from 200 miles up. My job was simple: clean the scratches, correct the exposure, sharpen what could be sharpened, hand it back. The man who handled my contracts was named Holt, a clipped, unhurried voice on the phone maybe 4 times a year, and he had exactly one rule he repeated every single time he sent me a new batch. Restore what you're given. Don't editorialize, don't flag anomalies in your notes unless they affect the usability of the image. Just clean it and send it back. I never once had a reason to break that rule before. I worked through the first batch over 4 months, the way I always did, building a rhythm out of routine until the surface in most of my phones felt as familiar as my own doorway. My 18th phone, something happened the way a single note catches your ear, and a song is heard a million times. There was a shadow falling across the lower right curve. Clean, hard-edged shadow. What you get when something solid blocks another light source. The sun in that frame sat to the left. The shadow fell to the right. I checked my notebook twice, certain I'd left some artifact behind from maybe a cleaning pass. I hadn't. I pulled the frames taken seconds before and after it in the satellite's original shooting order, and the shadow was still there in both, except its edge had moved slightly, the way a person standing at a window shifts their weight from one foot to the other without meaning to. By the time the sky outside my garage started turning grey, I had all 41 frames lined up edge to edge on my second monitor, and what sat at the corner of nearly every one of them, small, dark, and positioned and just close enough to the moon to throw that shadow across it, was something that should not have been there at all. I remember sitting back in my chair and feeling, for the first time, in longer than I could put a date to, the exact same quiet thrill I used to feel finding Saturn's rings through my father's department store telescope. It would be months before I understood how badly that feeling had misled me about what I was actually looking at. I called it that morning anyway, even though I already knew its rule, because some habits of honesty are harder to break than others. I told him I found an artifact across multiple frames that looked like it might be worth a second opinion before the set went back into the archive. There was a pause on the line longer than I'd ever heard from him before, and when he spoke again, his voice had lost its usual clip of boredom entirely. He told me to send the originals back and restore the artifact immediately, to delete any copies I made. He told me the contract for that batch was being pulled, and then, in a tone I can only describe now as careful, the way you talk someone down off a roof, he told me we should forget that folder at all. I didn't send anything back on the store. I kept a copy. That was my first mistake, and at the time it didn't feel like one. It felt like the only reasonable thing a curious person could do. The calls started about a week later. 10 or 11 at night, sometimes later, my phone lighting up on the nightstand with no name attached. Just a string of digits I never recognized. No voice on the other end. Just breathing, even and unhurried, like someone who wasn't in any rush at all. Followed eventually by a click. I told myself it was a wrong number the first 2 times. By the 5th, I'd stopped believing that, and I started leaving my phone face down in another room at night, which didn't stop the calls so much as it stopped me from watching the screen light up in the dark.
Brace yourselves!
I went looking for an explanation anyway, the way anyone reasonable would, hoping I could find something boring enough to make the whole thing evaporate. For one hopeful night I thought I had. There's a real, well-documented phenomenon involving faint clouds of dust that gather near a pair of gravitationally stable points along the moon's orbit, places where the pull of the Earth and the moon pushes out enough that loose material can collect there for years before drifting away again. A Polish astronomer first photographed 2 of those patches in 1961, a single year before my damaged negatives were taken. The discovery became almost overnight, like scientific answer to a much older rumour. People had been claiming there was a southern moon since at least the 1840s when a French astronomer, perhaps had found one, and was quietly ridiculed for the rest of his career once nobody else could confirm it. Even a famous American astronomer, the same man credited with discovering Pluto, spent 3 years in the 1950s combing that exact stretch of space for a solid body and came back with nothing at all. So, when the dust clouds were finally confirmed, faint and difficult enough to photograph that professional astronomers spent the next half-century occasionally failing to find them, the clouds became the answer everyone reached for whenever something near the moon didn't quite add up. I want to be honest with you, none of that part is invention. You can look all of it up tonight and it will check out exactly the way I've described it. The unsettling part isn't that the dust clouds exist. The unsettling part is how perfectly convenient it would be for anyone who needed the public to stop asking questions about anything for the next 60 years. It took 3 more weeks of careful, patient digging to find a name scrawled in pencil in the inside flap of the film canister those negatives had originally shipped in, half erased by the same water damage that had brought the frames to my desk. Sorrel Vance. Beside it, a string of numbers that turned out to be a small file code from a tracking and telemetry division most people have never heard existed. There's a difference between research and obsession, and I think I crossed it somewhere in that 3rd week, staying up until sunrise cross-referencing discontinued pension records against property filings in small desert towns. Kind of place a man with a government pension and a reason to disappear might quietly settle. I found him still living in the same house he bought in 1971. Never married, no listed next of kin, no presence anywhere online, newer than a phone book entry from before most people had a reason to be online at all. I drove out on a Saturday, the kind of overcast desert morning when the whole town looked like it might have been abandoned years ago, even though it clearly hadn't been. Every blind in his front windows was drawn, even the ones that didn't face the road, and the only sounds inside when he finally opened the door were 3 different clocks, none of them agreeing with each other or with the actual time. He looked at me for a long moment before he said anything at all. "You didn't call ahead," he said. "I don't have a number for you," I told him. "I found your name written inside a film canister." He stepped back from the door without inviting me in, which I took correctly as an invitation anyway. The first thing he asked, once I was inside, wasn't my name. It was whether I'd brought a phone with me. I said yes. "Leave it in the car," he said. "Then we'll talk." I want to tell you that conversation felt like an interview because that's the structure I prepared myself for. It didn't. It felt more like a confession he'd been holding on to so long. The words had gone stiff from disuse. He'd spent years as a telemetry analyst for a division that tracked objects in orbit against official charts, confirming shift after shift that everything up there was exactly where it was supposed to be. In 1968, during a routine pass on the moon, his readings showed a second object, keeping the most perfect pace within it, close enough that for a window of several minutes, his instruments couldn't fully separate the two readings into anything that made sense on its own. I fired it where I was trained to file anything unusual, he said. Wrote it up plain. No theories, just numbers that didn't match the chart. What happened after that, I asked. Within the week, I was reassigned to a division with no lunar tracking access at all, he said. Within 6 months, I was offered an early retirement, big enough that turning it down looked like I was hiding something. So I took it and came out here. I stopped looking at the sky entirely, and haven't started again in 20 years. Because once you've watched something through a tracking scope that you're fairly sure is watching you back, you lose your taste for looking up. I asked him what that had actually felt like in the moment, watching it through the scope. He was quiet long enough that I thought he might not answer. Like standing very still in a dark room, and realizing the room had noticed you'd stopped moving, he said finally. That's the closest I can get. It isn't about what you see. It's about understanding, all at once, that you've been seen back. He got up without explaining himself and disappeared into a back hallway for almost a full minute, long enough that I started to wonder if I'd pushed him into ending the conversation entirely. When he came back, he was carrying a single rolled sheet of paper, yellowed at the edges, which he unrolled flat across his kitchen table, and held down with 2 chipped ceramic mugs that had clearly been sitting empty on that table for a long time before I ever arrived. It was a hand-drawn star chart, the kind you'd make with a ruler and a steady hand rather than a computer, dated across the bottom in a column of years running from 1968 up through the early 90s, each year marked with a small, careful dot in a slightly different position relative to the moon's drawn orbit. I kept tracking it after they pulled my access, he said. Not with instruments, with my own eyes from this property, for as long as I was willing to still look up. Every year it moved a little, not the way anything natural drifts, the way something repositions itself once it's confirmed nobody serious is still watching closely enough to notice. I asked him why he stopped marking it after the early 90s. Because I finally admitted to myself what the dots were already showing me, he said, rolling the chart back up before I could ask to photograph it. And once you've admitted something like that to yourself, there's no version of continuing to watch it that doesn't feel like an invitation. He showed me one notebook after that, out of what I guessed were dozens stacked in a closet I wasn't allowed near, filled with his own private tracking figures, numbers he'd kept working it out by hand for years after he'd been told to stop. I asked carefully if I could photograph a few pages. No, he said, some things don't leave this house. I asked again anyway, twice, telling myself I only needed 1 page, just enough to confirm what he'd already told me out loud. He finally let me photograph exactly 1 page, on the condition that I never told anyone where it came from. I told Lyrics Vale where it came from within 2 weeks. That was my second mistake, though it would take a while longer for me to understand the shape of its consequences. Before I left that day, Vance told me the program that absorbed his report had a name he hadn't said aloud in over 40 years. Project Halcyon. He told me 2 people who'd gone looking into that name after him had been transferred to postings so remote that nobody, as far as he knew, ever heard from either of them again. Then he told me, in the same flat voice he'd used the whole conversation, to go home, forget the shadow in my photographs, and live whatever was left of my life pretending none of this had ever crossed my desk. I didn't take his advice. I also, against every instinct that should have stopped me, made one careless post on an old online forum a few
seeing
nights
so many
later
die in those
asking
weeks,
in vague
it
terms
made me realize
whether
how
anyone
important
had
it is to
ever
embrace
come
life
across visual
and to
artifacts in
celebrate
early
who
lunar
we are.
photography that didn't match
Life's
any
too
known
short to
equipment
live any
failure.
other way.
The breathing calls came back within 4 days, more frequent than before. And about 3 weeks after that, somebody else found me. Her name was Lyrics Vale, and she'd been tracking the name Project Halcyon for almost 3 years before I ever stumbled onto it by accident, piecing it together out of old appropriations documents, where enormous sums of money were attached to descriptions so vague they meant nothing to anyone outside, whichever small circle had written them. She found my forum post within a day of it going up, and replied with nothing more than a request to meet in person, no explanation, no questions answered, over any kind of line she didn't trust. We met at a diner 2 towns over from where I lived, the kind of place with a counter wiped down so many times the laminate had gone soft and grey. She arrived already holding a thick folder of photocopies, names blotted out in heavy black ink that had clearly dried decades ago, and she didn't waste time on small talk. "You found something real," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "It's the only reason you'd have posted something that specific, and that careless." I told her about the shadow in the frames, about Vance, about everything except the page from his notebook, which I held onto a little longer out of some instinct I should have trusted more than I did. She told me about the designation that kept appearing across nearly every document she'd ever managed to get her hands on. Never explained, never expanded.
What brings you here? Everybody wants something. Looking to buy?
left-handed, sitting quietly inside paperwork that otherwise had nothing in common. Asked her to. Not a mission, she said. Not a place. A designation for a single object. And every dollar I've ever traced toward it went one direction. Not towards studying it. Toward making sure nobody outside a very small room ever proved it existed. She slid one particular photocopy across the table, a funding request from the late 60s, the dollar figure attached to it large enough that I read it twice, the stated purpose nothing more than 4 words long. Continued lunar boundary maintenance. I asked her what that could possibly mean in practice, and she told me she'd asked herself the same question for 2 years before she stopped expecting a tidy answer and started simply collecting every document that used a phrase like it. I asked her why she'd given 3 years of her life to a name most people had never heard of. She didn't answer right away, turning her cup slowly on the table without drinking from it. Because the last abandoned program I chased down for a story turned out to be real, she said eventually. And the man who first told me about it stopped returning calls about 4 months after I started asking questions in the wrong places. I never found out what happened to him. I'm not interested in that happening to anyone else. I drag into one of these. That's not exactly reassuring, I told her. It isn't meant to be, she said. It's meant to be honest. I wanted to go straight to whatever Federal Records Office still had a physical archive and start pulling threads in person. She wanted to spend another month building a paper trail quietly, the way she always had. The way that had apparently kept her alive for years. We argued about it longer than I'm comfortable admitting, sitting in that booth while our food went cold between us. You've been doing this 3 years and you still don't have enough to print a single sentence, I told her, which wasn't fair, and I knew it wasn't fair even as I said it. And you've had this for 3 weeks, and you've already posted about it online, and let some retired engineer photograph evidence he didn't want photographed, she said. So maybe slow down isn't the worst advice you've gotten this month. She was right, obviously, in the way people are right when you don't want to hear it. We didn't fully resolve the disagreement that night. We just agreed, uneasily, to keep working together anyway, because neither of us had anyone better to trust with what we already knew. It was 3 nights later, alone in my garage close to midnight, that I made the mistake that actually put us both in danger. Buried in one of Lyrics' photocopied documents was an old internal phone extension, 6 digits, no area code, attached to a line item that simply read Coordination Office, nothing else. Numbers like that, disconnected for decades, usually just give you a dead tone or an automated message saying the line is no longer in service. I dialed it anyway, telling myself I was only testing whether it still rang at all. It rang twice. Then a man's voice, flat and unhurried, said a single sentence before the line went dead. We were wondering when you'd call. I didn't tell Lyrics what I'd done until 2 days later, when I noticed a car parked across from my house that I was certain I'd already seen twice before, in places it had no reason to be. She went quiet on the phone for a long time, after I explained it. You gave them a number that traces straight back to a landline with your name on the account, she said finally. That's not curiosity, Corvin. That's an open door. She was right again. Within the week, I came home from a short errand to find my garage door unlocked, though I was certain I'd locked it. And nothing inside obviously disturbed except one drawer, the one where I kept the printed frames from the original negatives, left very slightly open, the way someone closes a drawer carefully but not quite carefully enough. Sitting on top of the frames, where I knew for certain it hadn't been before, was a single photograph of my own house taken from the road outside, printed on plain paper, no note attached. I didn't call the police. Some part of me already understood, by then, that whoever had been inside my garage wasn't the kind of intrusion local police were equipped to do anything about. I drove back out to Vance's house the following weekend, mostly to apologize for the post I'd made, and to ask if he'd noticed anything unusual since my visit. The blinds were still drawn the same way they'd always been, but nobody answered the door, and when I finally walked around to the side window, the house looked emptied in the careful, deliberate way a house looks when someone has packed only what mattered to them and left everything else exactly in place, specifically so it wouldn't look like they'd left at all. The rolled star chart was gone from the kitchen table. The 3 disagreeing clocks were still there, still wrong, still running. I never heard from him again. I think about that more than almost anything else that happened. It was Lyrics who found the next name about 10 days later, buried in a retirement filing under a slightly altered version of his own surname, with an address in a small coastal town attached to it. Dr. Erin Quill had once been an astrophysicist, recruited early into the same hidden division that had absorbed Vance's report, and had left government work decades earlier under circumstances nobody had ever bothered to document anywhere public. We found him kneeling in his own garden, trimming a hedge with a kind of slow, deliberate attention people give to a task, specifically because the task lets them avoid thinking about anything else. He flinched, visibly, the instant Lyrics said the word Halcyon out loud, standing on the sidewalk in front of his own house in broad daylight. He let us inside anyway, on the condition that we shut every window first and that we turn our phones off completely, rather than simply silencing them. Open lines aren't something I've trusted in a long time, he said. I'm not interested in explaining why. You'll either believe me or you won't. What he told us over the next hour came out slow and careful, like a man choosing every word the way you'd cross a frozen lake 1 foot at a time. He'd been part of the original team assigned to study Aster 2 after Vance's report forced the program's hand. Their instruments confirmed within months that the object's surface beneath what looked from any distance like ordinary lunar dust built up over countless centuries was completely smooth underneath. No fractures anywhere across it. No evidence at all of the impacts that everything else nearby had clearly absorbed for as long as it had existed. Every time we got a tracking station close enough for a clean, direct image, he said, its position would shift, just slightly, just enough to blur the result, like something about being observed too precisely made it adjust itself before the picture could finish forming. I asked him what his team had originally been told the object's purpose was, before anyone started forming private theories of their own. We weren't told it had a purpose at all, he said. We were told it was a tracking anomaly that needed quiet, ongoing observation until it resolved itself. Most of us believed that for the first 2 years. The ones who stopped believing it were the ones who got moved to other assignments shortly afterward. I learned very early on exactly how long I was allowed to keep believing the wrong thing out loud before someone noticed I'd stopped. I asked him about the outpost on the far side of the moon, the one that had gone silent the same day his team confirmed Aster 2. I asked if he'd ever known any of the people stationed there. 3 men, he said, and his voice changed in a way I hadn't heard from him yet that afternoon. Something closer to grief than caution. I knew one of them from training, a quiet man, good with instruments, the kind who wrote his reports a full day early just so he'd have time to double-check them. I used to get his transmission second-hand, relayed through 2 other stations before they reached us. Just routine status updates, nothing that meant anything on its own. The last one he ever sent was perfectly ordinary. Equipment functioning normally. Nothing to report. Then nothing at all. Ever again. From any of the 3 of them, and within a week the entire posting had been struck from every roster I had clearance to see, like it had never been staffed in the first place. I spent years afterward telling myself they'd simply been reassigned somewhere I didn't have visibility into. I don't tell myself that anymore. I pushed him, gently at first, then less gently to say plainly what he believed the object actually was. He stopped mid-sentence more than once, looked at both of us for a long moment, and started again somewhere safer. Saying a thing out loud in a room gives it weight in that room, he said. I'm not willing to do that twice in one lifetime. I pushed a third time anyway, telling him we'd already risked enough, getting to his front door, that he owed us at least one direct answer. It was the wrong thing to say, and I knew it the moment his face changed. His house phone rang then, a single old rotary unit mounted on the kitchen wall. I hadn't even registered as a working line until that exact moment. Quill went pale in a way I haven't seen on another person before or since, walked over, picked it up, and listened without saying a word for almost 30 seconds. Then he hung up, turned back to us and told us, in a voice gone suddenly thin, that we needed to leave his house immediately and never come back. Before we reached the door, he gave us one final piece of information, almost against his own will, the words coming out fast like he regretted them, even as he spoke. The exact day my team's instruments first confirmed Asta 2 with certainty, he said, was the same day a small monitoring post on the far side of the real moon went permanently silent. No public explanation, no replacement crew. The record just stopped mentioning it had ever existed at all. And then, before he shut the door behind us, there's a man you should find. A Soviet radio operator from that same year, Vel Orison. If anyone outside this program ever heard the truth first, it was him. I never tried contacting Quill again after that. I think, given what I'd already cost Vance, that was the one decision in this entire story I'm genuinely glad I made. Finding information about a Soviet radio operator from the height of the Cold War should have taken months, if it was even possible at all. It took Lyrics a little over 2 weeks, and she found him through a community I hadn't known existed until she explained it to me. A loose, patient network of shortwave hobbyists who spend their evenings scanning frequencies for something most people have never heard of and wouldn't believe if you described it cold. There's a real and well-documented category of broadcast called a numbers station, faint shortwave transmissions, often introduced by a short signature tone or a snippet of music that read out long, unbroken strings of digits in flat, synthetic voices before falling back into static. Intelligence agencies on every side of the Cold War used them to send instructions to agents in the field. The messages decoded using a one-time code sheet that, used correctly, could never be broken by anyone who didn't already hold an identical copy. A handful of those stations went silent decades ago. A few are still broadcasting today, on schedules nobody outside a small community even knows to look for reasons no government has ever officially explained, including one that's been quietly humming on the same frequency since sometime in the late 1970s. That part isn't invention either. You can find recordings of stations exactly like this still active right now, broadcasting into the dark for an audience nobody has ever publicly identified. Lyrics' contact was a retired engineer named Aldous Pike, who'd spent the better part of 30 years quietly cataloguing one particular station's broadcasts, a station whose call signal matched an old Soviet listening post, officially decommissioned sometime in the 1980s after its operator was presumed dead. We met him in the cluttered back room of his own house, 3 different radios running at once, headphones hanging around his neck instead of on his ears, so he could keep half his attention on us. That station's operator was a man named Vel Orison, he told us. Far as the official record goes, he's been gone since sometime in the 80s. The station should have died with him. Equipment like that doesn't run itself for 40 years on nothing, but it's still broadcasting, Lyric said. Pike nodded slowly and pulled a recording up on an old laptop balanced on a stack of radio manuals. Sparse, irregular, the same short tone every time before dissolving into a long string of numbers, read in a flat, patient voice. I asked him what the oldest recording he had on file said, the one closest to when Orison would have first gone on the air. He didn't answer right away. He pulled a different file instead, dated to 1962, the same year as my damaged negatives, and played a fragment lyrics, and I had to listen to twice before either of us understood the words underneath the static. Orison, in his own recorded voice, describing a signal he'd intercepted that hadn't originated from anything human at all, riding in on the exact same frequency where the new object near the moon had first appeared on instruments. Then Pike played the most recent recording in his archive, made only a few weeks before we ever sat down in that room. The same short phrase, repeated 3 times, word for word, identical to the line Orison himself had transcribed back in 1962, broadcast from a station that, by every account anyone had ever given us, should have been silent and powerless for longer than I'd been alive. There were 2 sets of coordinates buried in Pike's old logs, not one. The first was the original transmitter's last confirmed physical location, a small listening post on an exposed stretch of northern coastline that had, according to every public record, been decommissioned and abandoned decades earlier. The second was fainter, harder to pin down, a relay signal Pike had only managed to isolate in the last few years, one that pointed much farther north, deep into the high Arctic, past any research site that appeared on any public map. Lyrics went very still when Pike read that second set of numbers of his transmission log, because she recognized them immediately. She'd seen that exact location before, buried in one of her own blacked-out funding documents, attached to a facility that, according to every record available to either of us, did not officially exist anywhere on Earth. We should start with the closer one, Lyric said, before I'd even finished thinking the same thing. If there's still a physical transmitter sitting on that coastline, somebody's been maintaining it. That's a fact we can stand in front of before we ever try standing in front of the other one. It took us 4 more days to arrange the trip. A short charter flight and then a long drive along a coast road that ran out of pavement, well before it ran out of distance. The listening post itself was smaller than I pictured, a low concrete building half sunk into the hillside above a grey, restless ocean, a chain-link fence around it sagging in 3 places where the ground beneath it had shifted. A sign on the gate, rusted, nearly unreadable, declared the site closed and the structure condemned. The padlock holding the gate shut had been cut clean through and left hanging in place, as though whoever had cut it wanted the gate to look locked from a distance without actually being locked at all. Inside, the air was cold in a way that had nothing to do with the weather outside, a stale mineral cold that smelled faintly of old machine oil, and something underneath that I couldn't name and didn't want to. Most of the building was exactly what you'd expect from a structure abandoned for decades. Dust thick enough to hold a footprint, ceiling panels sagging with water damage, a single hallway leading back to what had clearly once been the main radio room. The equipment in that room should have been dead. Most of it was, dials frozen, casings cracked, wiring gone brittle and grey. But one unit, set apart from the others on its own small table, had a single dim indicator light glowing steadily on its front panel, and when Lyrix laid her bare hand near the casing without quite touching it, she pulled back almost immediately and told me, in a voice gone tight, that it was warm. There was a logbook beside it, spine cracked, pages gone soft with damp, and most of the early entries, dated back to 1962, were written in a careful slanted hand. I assumed belonged to Velorison himself, technical and clipped, recording frequencies and signal strength the way any operator would. Tucked into the back cover, held in place by a brittle rubber band that crumbled the moment I touched it, was a small photograph, the corners gone soft and curled, showing a much younger man in a heavy coat standing beside a woman and a small boy in front of a building that wasn't this one, somewhere with trees and ordinary daylight, the kind of photograph someone keeps in a desk drawer rather than on a wall. There was nothing written on the back. I have no real way of knowing it was Orison in that photograph, and some part of me has never wanted to find out for certain, because if it was him, then whatever this station had quietly become after he disappeared had also, for reasons I can't begin to guess at, decided that photograph was worth keeping safe for 60 years, inside a building everyone official had agreed to forget. About 2/3 of the way through the logbook, the handwriting changed, mid-sentence, mid-word almost, as though the pen had simply been picked up by someone else without any acknowledgement that a change had happened at all. Whoever had taken over kept making entries in that same flat, technical style for years afterward. Long past the date, Orison was officially presumed dead. The most recent entry dated only a handful of weeks before we ever stood in that room. I asked Lyrics if she thought someone had simply taken over the post after Orison died. He kept doing his job out of some old loyalty nobody had ever bothered to explain. She didn't answer right away. She was looking past me, toward the doorway we'd come in through, and the dust on the floor like a second set of footprints, crossing our own, fresh enough that the edges hadn't softened yet, leading from the doorway into the radio room. And then, as far as either of us could trace them in the dim light, simply stopping a few feet short of the warm, glowing unit, as though whoever had made them had been standing in that exact spot only shortly before we arrived. And had not, as far as we could tell, ever walked back out. We didn't speak again until we were back outside the building, the gate swinging loose behind us, the grey ocean throwing a cold wind straight up the hillside into our faces. Lyrics had photographed the last page of the logbook. Before we left, the page bearing that same far northern relay coordinate Pike had isolated, written out in full, underlined twice, handwriting that matched none of the letters in the book. Somebody wanted us to find that page, she said, once we were back in the car with the doors locked and the heater running. Left exactly where we'd see it. That's not a coincidence. That's an invitation. Then we go anywhere. For once she didn't argue with me. We argued instead about timing, longer and more seriously than we had in the diner. Lyrics wanted one more month of building a careful trail before going anywhere near that second location. I told her Vance was already gone, that Quill had all but thrown us out of his own house in a panic, that the listening post behind us had just shown us, plainly, that whoever was on the other end of this already knew exactly how close we'd gotten, and that waiting another month felt, to me, less like patience and more like an excuse to never finish what we started. If we go up there and disappear, she said, nobody finishes this. Nobody even knows there was anything to finish. Then we tell someone where we're going before we leave, I said. We don't disappear quietly. We make enough noise on the way out that someone notices if we never make it back. It wasn't a perfect plan. It was, at least, a plan. And it was enough to get her to agree. We flew 2 connecting legs and then a small charter plane Lyrics arranged through an old environmental research contact, posing as part of a legitimate survey grant that gave us a believable reason to be flying supplies into a stretch of Arctic territory. Most maps simply leave blank. The cold up there found its way through every seam in my clothing within minutes of stepping off the plane, under a sky so dark and so clear that the stars looked uncomfortably close, something you could reach if you stood on the right hill. A man met us almost as soon as we'd unloaded our gear, standing along near the tree line in a coat too thin for the temperature, like the cold simply didn't register to him the way it did to us. He introduced himself as Knox Calder, and I already knew both our names before either of us said a word. He made more noise getting here than anyone I've dealt with in a long time, he said, for a moment. I genuinely couldn't tell whether that was meant as a warning or something closer to relief. He led us through a series of unmarked doors set into the side of the mountain, deeper than I expected any structure to extend. Past long rooms full of travel equipment that looked decades out of date, and one final observation deck with a single instrument into the sky. Twice on the way down, I heard something that sounded like a long, distant static rattle through the walls, themselves gone before anyone else called her, whether he'd heard it too. The second time he answered anyway, without my asking. The walls carry sound from the radio room at certain points, he said. get used to it. Eventually. Partway down one corridor, we passed a heavy door, newer than the others around it. No handle on our side at all, only a flat steel plate where a handle should have been. I asked Calder what was kept behind it. He kept walking for a few steps before he answered. And when he did, his voice had gone quieter than it had been the whole walk down. The records of everyone who came here before you and chose not to leave, he said. I won't open it while you're standing this close to it. Some things are easier to carry as an idea than as a number. I didn't ask again. Lyrics didn't either, though I noticed she walked a little faster past that stretch of corridor than she had anywhere else in the building, and didn't look back at the door even once we were well past it. A little further on, Calder stopped at a smaller side room, unlocked, its door propped open, like it was meant to be seen, rather than hidden. Inside, on long metal shelving that ran the length of 3 walls, sat rows of cold weather gear, folded with a precision that felt almost ceremonial, each set tagged on a small paper card, pinned to the collar. Calder didn't explain what the room was for. He didn't need to. I found myself reading the tags without meaning to, the way you can't help reading a name on a mailbox you pass every day. And 3 shelves in, my own chest went tight in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. One tag, handwriting faded but legible, read a name I already knew, Vance. I asked Calder how long that set of gear had been sitting on that shelf. Longer than your visit to his house, he said, not unkindly. I didn't offer anything further. He didn't need to. I thought about the rolled star chart missing from Vance's kitchen table, about the house emptied so carefully it hadn't looked emptied at all, and I understood standing in that cold room, with my hand not quite touching a shelf. I suddenly had no desire to touch, that whatever I told myself about him simply moving on had been a story I'd built for my own comfort, rather than anything resembling the truth. Lyrics put a hand on my shoulder and didn't say anything either. There wasn't anything to say that would have made the shelf look like less than what it was. I asked Calder, a little further on, why he was willing to talk to us at all, after everything we'd already seen happen to everyone else who'd gotten this far. Because I've spent most of my life keeping one secret alone, he said. A secret like that gets heavier every year. You carry it by yourself. I'm not interested in protecting it anymore. I'm interested in someone else finally understanding it, so I'm not the only one left holding it. He told us he'd spent more years inside Project Halcyon than either Vance or Quill, long enough to form a belief about Asta 2 that neither of them had ever been willing to say plainly. He didn't think it was a natural object that simply drifted into a stable orbit near Earth by accident. He believed it had been built long before any recorded human history, specifically to contain something, and that its arrival near our planet had never once been a coincidence. He connected it directly to the outpost that had vanished on the far side of the moon, the same day his predecessors first confirmed Asta 2, with certainty, the way Quill had described it to us. Whatever that outpost had quietly been watching over, Calder believed, had been moved, transferred, or simply released the moment Asta 2 arrived close enough to make the exchange possible. I told him that sounded like a theory built on 2 coincidences and 40 years of fear. It is, he said, without any defensiveness at all. I've had 40 years to test it against everything we ever recorded. It's the only theory that's never once broken. He brought us, finally, to a narrow room at the very bottom of the facility, lower than anywhere Quill or Vance had ever been allowed to work, where decades of tracking data sat stored on equipment that looked, despite its age, considerably more precise than anything either of them had ever had access to. He didn't tell us what we were looking at. He simply turned on the old display, fed it 60 years of recorded positions, and let it run. It took both of us a long, quiet minute to understand what we were actually seeing. The positions on the display weren't drifting the way every chart, every app, every observatory on Earth had always shown them. The motion only made sense, cleanly and completely, once you stopped assuming our own planet was the Lyrics point at the center of it. Lyric said it first, in a voice so quiet I almost didn't catch it over the hum of the old machines. It's not the men moving around us, is it? Calder didn't answer right away. He let the silence sit there long enough. The answer became obvious without me needing to say it at all. I wanted to see it for myself directly. The way you need to touch something to prove to yourself it's real, even after you've already been told it is. There was a manual override switch on the side of the main instrument. An old physical lever Calder had specifically told us twice never to touch. I reached for it anyway, telling myself I wanted a clean, direct reading. The same instinct that had made me dial an old phone number weeks earlier and post on a forum before that. The same instinct that had walked me past the sealed door I'd been told not to ask about and let me keep walking anyway. I don't fully know what I expected when I pulled in. What actually happened was that every screen in that lower room went dark for exactly 3 seconds, and the old radio equipment on the observation deck, 2 floors above us, crackled on by itself, without anyone touching it, and began playing the same short phrase Galos's abandoned station had been broadcasting for decades live from somewhere thousands of miles away. Calder didn't look surprised. He looked, if anything, like a man who'd been waiting a long time for exactly this to happen. I was almost relieved it finally had. It does that, he said quietly when someone finally understands. Understanding's the last requirement. After that, this stops being a safe place to leave from. I'm not going to describe everything that happened in the hours after that, partly because parts of it still don't sit clearly in my memory, and partly because I genuinely believe some of it would sound told out loud, like the words of someone who'd lost his mind, somewhere on the way north. What I'll tell you instead is only what's true and verifiable from where I'm sitting now. I'm the only one of the 3 of us who came back down out of that mountain. Lyrics didn't. Calder and I followed us up the stairs the way he said he would. I don't know what either of those facts means, and most nights I work very hard not to find out. I tried for a while to find her anyway. I called the last number I had for her for a few days, for almost 2 months, and every time it rang exactly twice before disconnecting on its own. No voicemail, no message. The same way the old coordination office line cut off the night I made my first real mistake in all of this. I drove out to the small apartment address she'd given me early on. The only piece of her life outside our work together that I'd ever actually seen. The building was real. The unit number was real. The man who was at the door told me politely enough that he'd lived there for going on 3 years and had never heard the name Lyrics Vale in his life. I stood on that landing for a long time afterward, not quite ready to walk back down the stairs, the way you stand in a doorway after hearing news you already suspected, and haven't yet let yourself believe. I tried Aldous Pike next, mostly out of sanity to confirm that at least one person from all of this was still where I'd left him. His phone number ran through to a recorded message saying it was no longer in service. I drove out to his house in a quiet afternoon and found the windows dark, a thin nailed nail already collected behind the screen door. The kind of stillness a house takes on, only after it's been empty for a while rather than just for after. The neighbour working leaves 2 doors down told me, without much interest, that the man who used to live there had moved out sometime in the last month. No forwarding address that she knew of, no real reply to anyone on the street. I didn't ask her anything else. I already knew by then exactly what kind of answer I was going to get. I still take restoration work, because the routine is the only thing left that feels like mine. 2 nights ago, a small batch of recent amateur lunar photographs came in for cleanup. Nothing classified, nothing strange, just ordinary noise. Reduction on a hobbyist's home telescope images. I worked through them the same way I always have. Slow and careful, half on autopilot, the way you do a task you've done so many times your hands know it better than your mind does. On the third frame, while I was still adjusting the exposure, the shadow along the lower edge of the moon shifted, very slightly, in real time, while my cursor was still hovering over the same spot on the screen. I sat there for a long moment without moving, the way you do when you're waiting for your own eyes to admit they made a mistake. They didn't. I thought for just a second about the department store telescope in my father's garage, about the steady patience it took to bring something that far away into focus, about how much simpler the sky had seemed, back when I assumed everything in it was exactly where it appeared to be, and nothing in it had any reason at all to notice me looking. My phone started ringing a few seconds later, the screen lighting up with no name attached, just a string of digits I didn't recognize. I picked it up out of habit before I could stop myself. No voice, just breathing, slow and even, like someone who isn't in any hurry at all. Then the click.
time and mine. Brace yourself. Forge the way.
Sharper still.
Persevere.
Hasten your pain.
Make haste. Brace yourself. March on.
Why should I fight and lose when I can acquiesce to the inevitable and survive?
Gaining adrenaline. Persevere. Make haste. March on. Adrenaline full.
Second quickening quality times.
Forge the way.
Push against fate and hasten your pain.
Brace yourself. Incoming.
Avoid this impending tempest.
Persevere.
The first to join the winning side is the greatest rewards.
Back in fighting position. All force. Brace yourselves.
Destiny quickening quality times.
Adrenaline rising. Brace yourselves. Forge the way. Adrenaline full. All together. Shake it off. Persevere. Brace yourselves. Feel the adrenaline. Incoming.
I chose you.
Make haste. Brace yourselves. Gaining adrenaline. Nice of me.
I'm the Cardinal of Air.
Reinforcements.
You cannot kill me.
You're finished.
Brace. Incoming.
Head back here. I have a theory I'm gonna
That looks
test,
valid.
but I'd rather have you all as backup. Just in case.
I warned you. Did you think I was joking?
happens if the key gets all that power and we have another Kadim on our hands?
First, let's handle the villain we know. And we'll deal with whatever comes after.
That's Kadim? What the flux has he become?
You're definitely bigger and uglier than you were at the Mystic Forge, but you still won't win.
Over toys and lesser gin. You're not playing Zalmaros' foolish games today. I warned you. Did you think I was joking?
Kill them all!
Another!
Your fatal mistake is believing this again.
Buster! Not energy. Break all together. Persevere. Adrenaline rises. Brace yourself. I make a pretty good team. All together.
Step aside. Every moment has been leading you to this victory. Over my inferiors, over the key, over Radashim.
Endurance drain. Buster. Getting off.
Lesser Jim. Now reach the seeds you sowed.
Ready for anything. Forged away. Brace yourself. Adrenaline rising. Are you so ruled by the past that you destroy the future?
Yes.
The king's right. All the power you've taken has corrupted you.
I emerged from the forge with greater vision. The future will be what I deem it to be.
Make haste. Target
Since I warned you, did you think I was joking?
Sharper still.
That looks valuable.
Citizen?
Greetings.